Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight. Tonight, Kalamu Salaam and I will be discussing two of his latest projects with UNO Press, the I Am New Orleans Poetry Anthology and Cosmic Deputy, a compilation of his poetry and essays. Before we begin, I'd like to first thank UNO Press and the Tennessee Williams Festival for giving me the opportunity to interview Kalamu about these amazing works. It is truly such an honor and a privilege. But first, let me tell you a little bit about myself to start. My name is Skye Jackson. I was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. I am primarily a writer of poetry, although from time to time you can find me dabbling in other genres. I have served as a poetry editor for Bayou Magazine, French Quarter Journal, and Tilted House. My first chapbook of poetry, A Faster Grave, was released by Antenna Press in 2019. Since then, I've been a finalist for the Rattle Magazine Poetry Prize and was most recently awarded AWP's Intro Journals Award for my work as well. And now about the man of the hour, Kalamu Salaam. Kalamu is an American poet, author, filmmaker, and teacher from the Ninth Ward of New Orleans. More than a teacher, he is a mentor who's been inspiring generations of students into finding meaningful paths for their lives through creative expression. He is a well-known activist and social critic who has spoken out on a number of racial and human rights issues. His awards include national and regional awards for poetry, playwriting, literary criticism, cultural criticism, and radio production. In his latest work, Cosmic Deputy, Kalamu wrote, I consider poetry the song of literature and consider myself a griot, an African-American praise singer who resounds with the voice and vision of my people. Without further ado, I give you Kalamu Salaam. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Kalamu.
You're
Is
welcome.
is there anything you'd like to say to everyone watching before we begin?
I identify as a Black poet. My relationship to America is fraught, as they say in the academy. And that has to do with, I'm 73. I'm hesitating because I will be 74 on the 24th of March.
Wow.
And I grew up as a youngster in the Jim Crow South, was a participant in the civil rights movement and in the Black Power movement. And I one time defined myself as a Black nationalist. And we were attempting to form a nation, preferably in the Deep South. I'm always a bit hesitant about identifying with America as a political entity. I'm an American in terms of the geographic, where I was born, reared, the culture I come out of, and everything else like that. But it's not a simple thing. I can't just say American and everybody knows who I am, or understands what I identify with. And so for some of us, this has been a fraught relationship in the sense that we can't say just one thing or the other. We could say it, but we'd be lying because that's not the way we feel.
That's so true. Thank you for sharing that, Kalamu. I would love for us to focus.
You looking at me with puppy dog eyes like, oh, I'm so sorry for you. I've had a good life. I don't feel at all as though it's been, ups and downs and pull me and all like that. No, I mean, I've traveled all around the world,
I know. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just gonna say, it was just when you were talking about, your fraught relationship with, identifying with one term or another. It resonated with me, and I think, you know, as Black people in America, we all feel like that, you know, and so it touched me when you said that. I think that's why I
Yeah.
made the face. I'm sorry.
All right. I mean, it's, you know, it is what it is.
True, that it is. Well, I would love for us to focus on the I Am New Orleans anthology first. How does that sound, Kalamu?
Sounds like a winner.
All right, awesome. Can you tell us what role Tom Dent played in developing I Am New Orleans?
In directly developing it, none. In being part of the underlying inspiration for me as a writer, everything. Tom was a mentor and a friend. And he and I came out of the Army in 1968. I'm born in 1947, graduated high school in 64 from St. Aug. 65, I'm up in, end of 64, I'm up in Minnesota, Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, about 50 miles away from the Twin Cities up there, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I did not like it. I ended up, it was on a trimester basis. I ended up quitting after 2 trimesters. But it was a fabulous education in the sense that I learned about myself and I learned about America in ways that I wouldn't have otherwise. While I was there, I got to see Norman Thomas, who was a major socialist. I got to see Ravi Shankar, Art Blakey. They were invited out to this, to the school. I was friends with foreign students, some of whom I never met before. And interesting, there were 2 colleges in Northfield. One was McAllister, the other is Carleton. And one of the days they had an open house at McAllister. So some of us from Carleton walked over. And I'll never forget this. You're going around to people's dormitory, to their rooms and what have you. So we're in this young lady's room, and she had her friends in the room, and I was with a couple of people from Carleton, all of whom were white. And this young lady looked at me and in all seriousness asked me, "What country are you from?" And I looked at her and I said, "I'm from this country. I'm from New Orleans." But what that told me was that there were, in the early 60s, this was 1964, there were vast stretches of the United States that had never seen Black people, literally had never seen Black people. And as far as they knew, particularly in a college or university setting, there were no Black people. And it wasn't malicious. She wasn't being malicious. It wasn't overtly anti-Black, racist. And she was being honest. She had never met a Black person before. And at the same time, because she was at a college and university, and in Minnesota, there are a lot of universities and colleges and what have you. They were more used at that point. They had a greater experience with Black people from outside the United States than Black people in the United States. So they had, at Carleton, we had students from all over, Turkey, South America, all kinds of places. So it was understandable in that context, but nevertheless, it still, you know, it caught me looking because I didn't see that coming at all.
How could you? You know, it's just astounding.
And so it helped me understand the realities of the United States. While I was there at Carleton, I was doing a radio program. First time I'd ever done, you know, radio, but I had the opportunity to do radio program. And in fact, I had a jazz program that came on at 8 o'clock. Part of my duties, well, I was supposed to get there half hour early, 7:30, and rip the news. This was when the news would come on teletype machines. And you literally had to pull the paper off and cut it up and tear it up into pieces so that the person that was doing the news would have whatever pieces they were going to use. And I got in there at 7:30, February 21st, 1964. And across the teletype, I'm reading about the assassination of Malcolm X. It was, that's one of the things, again, I'll never forget. And that happened in that context. Later that week, one of the fellow students at Carleton, she was dating a guy who was at the Audubon Ballroom when Malcolm was shot, and sent her a letter in which he described what had happened. There were a number of students at Carleton who were part of the SDS, Students for Democratic Society. And I could go on and on and on about it, but it was that kind of experience that I never would have had any, even if I had gone to LSU or for a certain extent to Harvard, because there was so much going on there. But this was an isolated place, you know. I'm in Northfield, Minnesota. The biggest thing that ever happened for Northfield, other than the two colleges being there, was that's where the Jesse James gang got shot up and they broke up after that. So Jesse James, you know, everybody knows Jesse James. Well, they broke up after that. And that was the end of the Jesse James gang. But it was an experience for me. That was where also I first saw Knife in the Water, which was an early film of Roman Polanski. And I became very interested in doing cinema at that point. But that's enough about that. I mean, I could tell you more, but that's, you know, you asked me about I Am New Orleans and Tom Dent. Well, what had happened was when I left Carleton, I ended up going into the Army. I was in the Army for 3 years, and I was electronic repair and maintenance of the Nike Hercules nuclear missile. And again, I'm all right.
I'm
You know,
I'm a very active listener.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I'd been trained in dealing with that, you know, the nuclear missile and all that stuff. Plus, I had training in chemical, biological, radiological warfare. And, you know, served a year in the mountains, about 50 miles from the DMZ, the demilitarized zone in South Korea. So I had that experience also. And that was my first time outside of the country. But there, I went to South Korea, but also to Japan a couple of times. And that kind of opened me up between Carlton and the Army, I was all the way open. Now as I said, like the blind man said, "Oh, I see." Had that operation, now you can see. Well, I had those experiences and I can see it. And I had a civil rights background, but I did not have a full world culture background. So the Army, between the Army and Carlton, that's what I got. And when I came back home after the Army in '68, summer of '68, I get home and my girlfriend of the time knew that I was interested in writing and theater, but also music and photography. And she recommended that I check out the Free Southern Theater. I had written to her and told her what I was interested in when I got out. And she said, well, there were 3 theater companies, Nat Turner Theater, Dashiki Theater, and Free Southern Theater. And she thought Free Southern Theater was what I would be interested in. I checked out all 3, and Free Southern Theater was indeed what I was interested in. And the person who was in charge of the Free Southern Theater at that time was this long, tall, elegant man by the name of Tom Dent, the son of Albert Dent, who was the president of Dillard University. And he had a, not quite as strange, but it certainly wasn't, they didn't toss the football around. Tom would tell me about tossing the football around with Paul Robeson, who would come to visit at Dillard, but not with his father. That they didn't have that kind of relationship. So, and in fact, I can remember we spent one Mardi Gras watching parades, and it was Tom, myself, and Paul Robeson's son. So Tom was, that gives you an idea of how close we were. He was like, almost like a big brother to me, and encouraged me in terms of writing and everything else like that. And was interesting is that when we began performing, Tom was never a performer. He was never a great reader of his own poetry. But that was easy for me. And so in one sense, I was in advance of Tom in that regard, but in everything else, he was the person that taught me. And with Tom, we traveled all over the South, from Texas to the Carolinas. Then Tom would have new people from around the world, particularly Africa and the Caribbean, and they would come to visit. And of course, I would be introduced to them through Tom. Yeah. Tom was, oh man, sometimes I go visit Tom and he's sitting up there with James Baldwin, and they talking shit. And it wasn't like it was no big thing. And of course, I only knew Baldwin from the books, but Tom knew him personally, and Baldwin would be at the house. And so I got the chance to really get to, in one sense, get to know Baldwin. Now, I wasn't close to him or anything, but whenever he would visit Tom, I would be there, and so forth and so on. The person I consider the greatest poet in the Western Hemisphere, Kamal Brathwaite, who recently made his transition. But Kamal Brathwaite was good friends of Tom and became a good friend of mine. Kamal is from Barbados, but he worked for the most part in Jamaica after getting out of the Foreign Service. he had as most of the people in the islands did, who were of the formerly of British colonies, he had received this real heavy education that included, they had to do a year or two of foreign service. So he had spent a year in Ghana and then came back to the Caribbean. And so I got to know him. And later on in life, I did a lot of work in the Caribbean, throughout the Caribbean. So, you know, we were good friends. And Tom was the person that put me on that particular track of life. So when you ask me about Tom, Tom was long gone, had made his transition by the time this book came along. But in another sense, Tom was a major inspiration for me, because Tom also believed that the writing couldn't just be about yourself. You had to work in the context of a group. He was part of what was often considered the first major post-civil rights era Black writing group, Umbra Workshop in New York. And he came down here and was working, you know, with the Free Southern Theater, and that's how I knew him. So, and also there's another connection. Also, Tom, as I said, would introduce me to a lot of people. One of the people he introduced me to was a man by the name of Marcus Christian. And I did not know or hang out with Marcus Christian in any sense, but I knew through Tom, I knew who he was. And since they had the Marcus Christian papers after Marcus Christian died at UNO, then I would go to the library, the UNO library, and I read through a lot of Marcus Christian's work. So that was also there. And these are things that you don't know just by picking up the book. You have no idea about these connections. But I firmly believe that what we do as artists, I believe in what I call a jazz aesthetic or an African aesthetic, in that it is what we do is not so much what I do, but what we do. And there's an emphasis on the collective. So that when the idea came, I thought I knew about Marcus Christian's poem. In fact, I worked in later years. My mind is racing because I haven't told you about working with students at the center, working with the high schools. I worked with McDonald 35, Douglas, and McMain for the most part. And while I was there at McMain, we used to teach I Am New Orleans, the poem by Marcus Christian. So one morning I woke up and there it was, knocking on my cranium saying, hey, do something about New Orleans. So that's what I did. It was, some people would call it a dream effort or whatever. I just recognized it and it made sense to me. And there are two people in the collection that are deceased. One is Marcus Christian, when the book is titled I Am New Orleans, after his epic poem, and that's the first poem in the collection. And the other is Tom Dent. And so that's how that came about. Marcus Christian, I knew of Marcus Christian's work well before I met Tom Dent. Marcus Christian had a poem in an anthology that was put together by Orna Beauchamp and Langston Hughes. And Langston Hughes is, of course, one of my patron saints, the patron saint. I'm not religious, but I have a patron saint. That's Langston Hughes. So I had read that anthology when I was in high school. And in the anthology, they had a poem by Marcus Christian about McDonald's Day, which you don't know anything about. But it used to be during the Jim Crow era that McDonald's Day was celebrated by the public schools here. And you go to the statue of McDonald, which is by the main library, and you would go. And being that this was Jim Crow New Orleans, all the students from all across the public schools went. And you know, all the McDonald's schools they have in New Orleans?
Yes, sir.
Well, that was because
he left that endowment, right? That they had to do that every year, from what I understand.
Well, not so much they had to do the program, but that the schools.
Yeah.
And there were two places, New Orleans and Baltimore. And so we would go, you go down there and you had to, they would bring flowers and, you know, have you recite something or sing something or whatever. But I mean, the whole class, and all the different schools were there. And of course, during Jim Crow, we all had to be there at the same time, but the Black students had to wait until after the white students. So we had, you know, we might get there noon or not do anything until 2 o'clock, but stand around and get sunburned, you know. But that's the way that was, and that's where it is. So I knew of Marcus Christian because of his poem that was in the On a Bontemps and Langston Hughes collection, and his poem was about McDonald's Day. And one of the lines is very ironic poem because he was saying how, you know, as I remember it, how the students looked good. They were all dressed in their finest. And he was saying something to the effect of how dear it was. How dear was the cost of honoring John McDonald. And, you know, it was because it cost to dress up for that event. And it was an event in honor of a slave owner, and he knew it. I mean, and the poem is not, how could I put this? It's political in the sense that many of the things were in the 50s. You could get in a lot of trouble for calling white people whites in the 50s. So you had to, they were, as we used to say, they went through the side door. But it was clear what he was talking about. At least to us, it was clear. And I just woke up with the idea, and I'm a firm believer in honoring our ancestors. You should do that. I mean, you should really do that. So it's not about me. It was about honoring the ancestors, and you involve your peers in whatever you're doing. And so I said, okay, let's saddle up, let's do this. And I have, that's another story, but I have a background in publishing and what have you. I worked 13 years as the editor for the Black Collegian magazine. So I knew the publishing world and how to do that. And I can do it rather easily. I can't raise the money easily, but other than that, you know, the technicalities of putting together poetry events I can do that in my sleep. Or as soon as I wake up, just jump up and do it. And that's what happened with I Am New Orleans. And there's this young poet, Skye Jackson, and she happened to know one of the people with whom I was working. And that person said, I got this friend who is writing poetry. And actually, Skye was the only one of the poets I didn't know, shit, that's not true. There were two other people I didn't know personally. There were two people, Skye and what's the name, Tony, Akila Tony. I didn't know them personally, but they came recommended to me, and I said, well, I'll check it out. And hey, I said, okay, that's the way it rolls. And that's the way we did things. This was not like so many literary things, or if you know the editor or the publisher, you get in. If you don't know them, they ignore you, you know. That's not the way we roll. We went for whatever made sense at the moment. And we always open for influences. And that goes back to what I told you earlier. I learned early on from being in the Army and being in Korea and being at Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, and meeting people from all around the world, that you got to stay open. You have to stay open. You be yourself, but always be open to, you know, new things, new ideas. And I'm a jazz freak, so, you know, the jazz cats, you know,
improvisation is key, you know, making it, you know, just working together, embracing the collective, as you always say.
And at the same time, not being stuck in the past. You always want to keep an ear out for what's happening now and what's likely to happen in the future. So that's the way I Am New Orleans came about, and it's quite a collection. I think that it's quite a collection.
No, it really is. Let me hold up a copy so that everyone can see it. It's really a really amazing book.
And that's Marcus Christian. That's a picture of Marcus Christian as a youngster.
Wow.
That I found. And so that's Marcus Christian and I Am New Orleans. There's what I always attempt to do with the work is have layers, so that it is what it seems on the surface, but it's also more than that. And so with my work and what have you, that's what I do. I try and be multi-layered. In fact, let's see, I'm gonna call this out because I looked this up. 165, A Moment in a Mississippi Juke Joint. Now this, I'm gonna read it first and then I'll tell you what it says after. Page 165.
Okay.
A moment in a Mississippi juke joint. Wilma May looks at John L. His slender eyes and taunt behind. Bared arms, blackberry dark, with grapefruit-sized biceps, but especially the massive slope of his head with broad textures like the Benin bronze she didn't consciously know about, but subconsciously gravitated toward. And those teeth, shiny like lighthouses down on the Gulf Coast, flashing through the ink of stormy night. Wilma May looked at his feet and the slow grind of his hips, keeping time to the jukebox, and sucked her breath in slowly. She would have taken a seat, except she was already sitting with her thighs pressed tightly closed. Just then, John L. threw his head back and sprayed the ceiling with the mirth of his laughter, and casually did a little dip on the offbeat of the break in the undulating song. God, she thought, that man looks like a tractor, and I feels like a field what ain't never been plowed. Now,
that's so incredible.
What's incredible about it?
Oh my gosh, it's just so vivid. I mean, it takes you on such a journey in just the description of this person and their essence, that capturing the essence, the mirth of laughter splashed across the ceiling, the blackberry skin, the grapefruit arms, you know, he's made to be so delectable, so tantalizing, you know, and it draws us in more. I mean, I don't know, that was my impression.
I hear you. Okay, let me tell you about it. There was a point politically where a lot of academe would criticize Soviet poetry and Soviet art and Soviet influenced art. And so they would say things like, what is a Soviet romance? And then the answer is a man and his tractor. And so what I wanted to do was take that criticism and turn it around on its head. And so consciously only use images that people who would be considered peasants would be familiar with, put it in an erotic or romantic setting, but it's actually an attack on those people who think that the Soviet approach, hence the socialist approach to literature, is not romantic. There's no romance in it. So you get to feel the romance, but this is not a poem about romance. This is a poem really attacking the Western concept of romance, but doing it from the standpoint of people who are seldom given romantic agency, that is, quote unquote, the peasants. So when you think about sharecroppers and you don't even think about romance, but they are people, you understand? And they have lives,
feelings,
and loves,
desires.
Yeah, all of that. And so that people who are not normally given that agency in this poem are specifically given that agency. And I didn't want to talk about the politics per se. I just wanted to do the poem and leave people with a good feeling about it. Because we can do the politics later, you know?
Yeah. Wow, that was an incredible reading, Kalamu. So mind-blowing. I wanted to ask you about some of the poets that you selected for I Am New Orleans. And maybe if you want to just tell us a little bit about, you know, what your process was for choosing each poet. For, you know, you said you pretty much know everyone who's in here except we didn't know each other at the time, in Akila Tony, but is there anything, you know, what were you looking for? What was drawing you to these poets and their poems?
I pretty much spelled it out in the introduction in the book. You know, I just woke up and say, hey, send me, you got something, send it. I'm not, you get me confused with somebody that's erudite or something like that, you know.
Well, did you have them first read the I Am New Orleans poem, or
nope.
or you just said, just send me your New Orleans poems? Right.
I said as I say here, let me see if I can pull it up right quick. It says, yeah. I challenged my fellow secretaries of the spirit. No restriction on genre or form. Brief haiku or full-throated 5-page rap, no matter. Pious paeans or pouty mouth screams. Just identify us for who we be. Who's the prettiest? We is. Tell the truth and every little thing will be all right. So just write about New Orleans. That's the way, and we end up with 36 because that's who responded.
Mm.
It wasn't like I had a cutoff line or anything else like that. There are a couple of people that they couldn't, for various reasons, they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not I've done a lot of anthology work, but I came out of work with the Black Collegian magazine as an editor. So I knew a lot. I mean, I know a lot of people, but I also don't believe that you should try and get only the very best, you know. No. Mm-hmm. No, you give everybody a shot and see what you got.
Yeah, I mean, and it came out so beautifully. I mean, it's very organic. And I guess I asked you that question because these poems seem to be so much in conversation with the Christian poem. Yeah. What immediately comes to mind is "My City's Not for Sale." My city ain't for sale by Sunni Patterson. You know. Yeah. And it's like the I Am New Orleans poem, you know, it really takes on the voice of New Orleans. I mean, Christian personifies New Orleans, and then we get Sunni's poem, which speaks to that, but in a different way, you know. And so that's why I was curious about, you know, how much the poets knew about the poem and that sort of thing, just because it's in such wonderful, rich conversation with one another.
Well, I knew what I was doing and putting it together, but the poets didn't necessarily know. Mm. You know, and again, this is the jazz aesthetic. So Miles is on the bandstand, he's the leader, or John Coltrane's the leader, or Sunrise the leader, and calls a number, the band plays it, but he doesn't tell so-and-so what to play. You know, either you do or you don't. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because there is no preordained script. You bring whatever you bring, and the idea of being a leader is, rather than tell people what to do, you try and choose people that can do, and then get out the way and let them do. And that's a different aesthetic, that you just choose people that can do something, get out the way and let them do it. And as a leader, when you can find those kinds of folk, then you got something, you know. And so I've done about 5 or 6 anthologies. In fact, here's Tell the Truth, Shame the Devil time. In 98, I believe it was 98, let me make sure, since you got me on tape. I don't want to knowingly lie. I mean, I will lie. And I consider you an enemy, I will lie to you till you see. No, that's just, well, anyway, 1998, yeah. We did From a Bend in the River.
Oh, wow.
100 New Orleans poets. And the majority of the poets in here are not Black poets. We're just from all over the city. Mm. And when I did I Am New Orleans, here's a little twist on it. Marcus Christian's poem, if you read about it, he talks about the city as a whole, all the various ethnic groups and whatever. I said, I just want the Black folk. I want to work on the Black hand side. And in fact, I almost dare anybody to question, well, how can you say you New Orleans and you don't include anybody but Black people? Oh, because I did that already in 1998, From a Bend in the River. That's already done. Now we're doing something else. I'm waiting for somebody to say that. Because what I'm saying to them is that you're accusing me of ignoring white people, and I'm telling you, you don't know nothing about Black people. And that's why we're doing I Am New Orleans this way. And I've already done a major anthology that includes you know, a lot of white people, Jewish, German, so forth and so on. A couple of Cajuns, you know what I mean?
I mean, the truth of the matter is, right, everything that everyone loves about New Orleans is because of Black culture. And so,
not everything.
you know, I mean, most of the things that I think that people associate, you know, with New Orleans. I mean,
yeah, I understand what you're saying. But
you know, I'm not trying to take, you know.
No, I understand what you're saying. And believe me, you can't be any more proud of pushing Black folk than I can. But you got to understand that New Orleans has a reputation that goes beyond what we see and know. So every year when they do Southern Decadence, it don't have nothing to do with Black folk. You know, New Orleans was known as one of the areas where sexual deviance was embraced. And so that's what Southern Decadence is about. And so in New Orleans, although most of us don't know it, because most of us are not in that world, in New Orleans, this is considered homosexual paradise. You know, and New Orleans is known for that. It's just that that slice of Americana is not trafficked. I'm using that word, trafficked. We don't traffic in that slice that much, even though there's a strong element of Black homosexuality that's celebrated in New Orleans. In fact, the first great jazz piano player, Tony Jackson, was a homosexual. And that's part of what Storyville was about. And so what I'm saying is, I celebrate Black New Orleans, but I don't ignore the fact that there's other aspects of the city which are just as celebrated. And once you move outside of certain circles, those other aspects are well known. Go find a Southern Baptist. I bet you they know what Southern Decadence is about. Even if I'm talking about the white Southern Baptists, because they fight it hard. That, you know, when you know, Southern Decadence and the parade in the French Quarter and all that stuff come about, they be on the street corners
with the signs,
yeah,
and the fire, the brimstone.
Yeah, see, you know about it. I know you've been down there. I see you. So you're telling on yourself, but you see.
Well, you know, I see things.
Yeah, so I've heard of it. Yeah, right. But here, check this. We know about it, but we don't own up to it. We don't publicly own up to it. And then once we start talking about, yeah, you know, I've been there. Well, you know, I'm from New Orleans. I can't help but see some of that stuff. But we don't at the same time, we act like it's untouchable, except when we're down there dealing with it. And that's what I'm saying about New Orleans and what we do in terms of I don't put any restrictions on myself or the people I work with. You know, what's the national anthem of New Orleans? Do what you wanna.
Exactly.
that's our national anthem. I mean,
we're gonna do what we're gonna do.
That's right.
Every day.
Yeah, that's right. And twice on Sunday, if we can get away with it.
That's real. That's real.
And the thing about it is, that's an aspect of the city that we have been encouraged not to acknowledge in quote unquote polite company. You know, but you and your spoogie, y'all go down there and do that, don't you?
I mean, you know, I'm a writer. I have to observe. I need to see what's going on.
No, you know, no. That don't have nothing to do with you being a writer. It don't have nothing to do with you being a writer. Look at you laughing and shit about it. That has nothing to do with you being a writer.
My goodness.
You know, you could be a cook, you could be a seamstress, you could be anything and still be down there for that reason. You understand what I'm saying?
That's true.
And that's part of what's the real spirit of New Orleans, is that it is not culturally aligned with the puritanical culture or conditions of the United States of America. Mm-hmm. We on a whole different tip down here. In fact, you know, you heard of P. Funk's mothership? Mm-hmm. It landed here first. I'm serious. That's New Orleans was where it launched from. Yeah. That's P. Funk. Right here in New Orleans was when the first concert that featured the mothership. I was there.
Wow. That's incredible.
And at the same time, because I was the editor of the Black Collegian magazine, I had the opportunity to interview George Clinton, and we talked about that and so forth and so on. So anyway, that's this book, I Am New Orleans, and Marcus Christian's poem embraces the totality of who we are. And I just wanted to do something on the Black hand side, and so that's why that book is what it is.
I'm so glad you said that, because that kind of brings me to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
In the foreword of I Am New Orleans, you wrote, "We celebrate the positives and work to transform the negatives. While we exclaim what we love, we do not deny that there are wrongs that seem to always remain to be righted." And I think what I love about this quote, and what I love about the way that the book is curated, is that it was important for you to show the both negative and the positive aspects of what it means to live within New Orleans. Why was it so important to you to show? Because I mean, so many people just see one side of New Orleans, like you said, or one aspect or one facet of it. But this book really encompasses, you know, kind of the totality, the positives and the negatives.
I'm a human being. You know, to put it in a vernacular, we eat and we shit. You know, we enjoy a good meal, and we enjoy eliminating, emptying our bowels, as the literate would say. And most of the time, you cannot find literature, and seldom find anybody who will own up to the joys of emptying one's bowels, you know. But you talk to poor people, working class, you know, and particularly when you talk to them in an intimate way, if you're taking a piss with somebody, they'll tell you how good it feels to have this leak. Oh, that feels good. When have you seen that in literature? You don't, because most of the culture has people to only celebrate quote unquote acceptable parts of themselves. Whereas among the working class, all of us acceptable, because we know, you know, if you eat, you shit. It's that simple. You know, and you know we like to eat down here.
Oh, yes, indeed. So, I'm missing gumbo right now.
Yeah, you probably got the fixings in the cabinet there. You do all right.
You know, I'm in Vermont right now, so it's kind of some things are hard to find. Like, it's hard to find here. They don't have the shrimp with the heads on them. When you go to the grocery store, I'm like, I want the shrimp. You know, like, there's some things that I just cannot find. It just grinds my gears. But yeah, you're right. I can make it, but not without a lot of effort.
All right.
Finding things.
Yeah. Okay. I hear you. So that's I Am New Orleans. That's Marcus Christian, and the reason his poem is first is because it is, as far as I'm concerned, the best description, poetic description of New Orleans that exists.
You know? Okay. Well, thank you, Kalamu. So next, I
Mhm.
really, I really want us to kind of take a step back and sit and watch the videos from the I Am New Orleans video series. If that would be okay with you.
Yeah, that's the University of New Orleans. And I
Mhm.
have a relationship with Abram Himmelstein, who is the honcho of University of New Orleans Press. And he he's originally from Mississippi,
Mhm.
Jewish, and not at all, how can I say it? He's not at all interest, not interest is not the way to say it. He's not wowed by degrees and positions in society. He's very much somebody that's interested in people.
Mhm.
And truth be told, New Orleans is one of the places, and it's the only place in the South that has a strong, not only Jewish community, but Jewish culture. So that if you look, for instance, Canal Street, from Krause down the World Lines, oh, that's Jewish, you know? And the Jewish people are not generally celebrated in the Deep South, except in New Orleans. So Abrams out of Mississippi moves down to New Orleans, and he doesn't bring with him the starry-eyed vision of New Orleans, you know, and he comes out of a Jewish background. And so there's a lot that a struggle that he's interested in. And when I say struggle, I mean finding ways to deal with the social and political prejudices and conflicts that are endemic to the Deep South. And so there you have Abram on one hand, and then you got me, and y'all can tell from this interview, I really don't give a damn. Me and what's his name, Claude Gable?
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. That's the way that's just the way I feel about it. You know, we're gonna do what we're gonna do. And so Abram gives us the opportunity to do that. So I couldn't think of any other press in New Orleans that would have given rise to I Am New Orleans. And one of the things he thought of, let's do some videos to go with it. And the person he got to asked to do the videos, Weenta, is from Ethiopia.
Oh,
Or is it,
wow.
no, not Ethiopia. It's what's underneath Ethiopia. It'll come to me. She's East African,
Okay.
you know, and so we're going back to this whole concept of the world. We're dealing with the world. Later for, you know, getting caught up in America first and all that kind of bullshit. No, we're gonna deal with the world and with people in the world, and particularly with people who are often overlooked or undervalued by the system. And that's where we are. So these videos are by Eritrea. She's from Eritrea. These videos that Weenta did are promoting I Am New Orleans, but she's not from New Orleans, you see. She lives here now, she works here. Abram is not from New Orleans, you know, and many people do not consider us from New Orleans because when they show New Orleans, they'll put people who are on WDSU or WWL, you know, they'll go uptown and do St. Charles Avenue and so forth. I'm from the Lower Ninth Ward. Mm-hmm. So we're expanding the view of what New Orleans is. And these videos reflect that without having to say a word, that no, New Orleans is more than what you know. So go ahead.
Awesome. That was an amazing introduction, Kalamu. That was so amazing. Okay, well, we're gonna, watch the videos. I'm really excited, even though I've seen them a million times, to watch them again. So just give us a few minutes and we will be watching the video.
$10 reward will be paid to any person who will bring to number 27 Chapatula Street a Negro girl about 13 years of age, very dark, rough skin, quite sprightly, and wears a blue cottonade dress. She is of rather short stature. Her name is Martha, and she absent herself on the 24th of November. I shuck that dress, found 2 ears of corn clinging to a gunny sack on the docks, enough to stop my gullet's teeth from chewing through my rough skin, the bag an easy fit. Last night rolled myself in dog shit, enough to make the pretty noses and the sharp eyes above them turn away from my burlap slip. Replace cottonade, that whiff of Louisiana cotton, with a warp of Tennessee jute, printed in indigo, the color staining my thin thighs purple with the blood of my kin red, embracing the work of their hands blue.
Not my potions or my spells, not my crawfish or my crabs, not my brass or my ass. Ain't none of it for sale. Not my cemetery or my temple, not my land or my love, not my plyrines or my huckabucks. Ain't none of it for sale. Oh, you peeping Toms and Sallys, you Wisconsins and Nebraskas, you thieves and tax collectors, ain't nothing over here for sale. Not my theater or my park, not my music or my art, not my soul or my heart, ain't none of it for sale. You bandits and you conmen, you dumpster divers and hoodlums, keep your eyes off my prize, 'cause ain't nothing over here for sale. Not my shotgun or my cottage, not my ballrooms, none of my houses. If you ain't hear it in the last announcement, ain't nothing over here for sale. Not my parent or my nanan, not my auntie or my granny, my pawpaw, not none of my family. I'm telling you, ain't nothing of mine for sale. Not my sinners or my saints, not my coulds, not even my can'ts. Don't see the picture? Let me grab my paint. Make it pretty, pretty. Use proper language. Oh, there is nothing over here for sale. Not my culture or my crown. This city has had enough of you clowns. Want to build it up but keep me down or anything to make that sale? Now you want me to give you all I got. You want my window and my pot. Now Lord knows it ain't a lot, oh, but it's mine. And it ain't for sale. Now see, you don't know me or my kind. My heritage, my history, my line, my dignity, my legacy, my pride. Oh, some things just ain't up for buying. So while you gentrify and you plot, while you calculate and allot, of all the things, put this one on top. Ain't nothing over here for sale.
I miss you on Sunday. I look for you amongst the feathers, behind a mask, search this crowd for your face. I said that I would not come out this year. that I have nothing to celebrate, too many things to mourn. Yet and still the downbeat lulls me here. New Orleans is a sea of ghosts. Everywhere are reminders of those things beautiful and lost forever.
I am
I am
I am New Orleans.
a perpetual Mardi Gras of wild Indians, clowns, lords and ladies, Bourbon Street Jezebels, baby dolls, and fat cats.
Peanut vendors, flower sellers, organ grinders, chimney sweeps, and fortune tellers.
And then, at the end, bone-rattling skeletons and flying ghosts. I am New Orleans.
A city that is a part of and yet apart from all America.
A collection of contradictory environments.
A conglomeration of bloods and races and classes and colors.
Side by side, the new tickling the ribs of the old.
Cheek by jowl, the ludicrous making faces at the sublime.
Here in the graceful curve of Old Man Mississippi,
where the lazy old father of the waters meanders down to the Gulf.
I sing my song. I sing the song of the siren, the voluptuary, the sybarite.
and here within this evergreen valley and under warm tropical skies,
where guitars tinkle softly deep in a moonlit night,
and softer voices whisper of my beauty. I sing of the newest phases of my greatness,
reveling in the quickening of progress within and around me.
I sing of the bewildering expanses of far-reaching bridges and overpasses.
I sing of glittering cities of the sky thrusting themselves up from the delta mud, brushing the clouds of heaven with dreams of Brazilian beauty and grace.
I sing of far vistas of asphalt streets and highways, beckoning us on to fantastic future years.
I sing of the past, the present, and the boundless future. I sing of love, adventure, and enchantment.
Sing, O my children, sing! Sing of a day that long was, and finally remembered still is, but can never come back again.
That was so amazing. Those videos are just so incredible. There's so many things that I notice about each of them and so many questions I have. Like in the Martha video, you know, she is sitting, you know, on Tchoupitoulas and Canal, but she's not, you know, like there's a recording of her voice playing, you know, but she's just, you know, watching the camera or posing almost, you know. And so I wondered about, you know, why that choice was made to you know, to film her just kind of sitting and then having the poem playing in the background.
Because she's a runaway. That's Marian. She's writing. Marian, in fact, Marian is from Shreveport, Louisiana. And she was in our workshop, our writing workshop. This is an interesting piece that she did about being a runaway. And at the same time, she's just sitting.
Yeah.
You know,
there's such a stillness to it, you know. It's just like, it just, oh, it's incredible. And
but that's Weenta. Weenta she's a hell of a cinematographer. She knows what she's doing.
yeah, she outdid herself with that. I mean, such a great concept. I have so many questions about the Kristina Kay Robinson video. There's so much imagery there. You know, there's like that lush green background. There's the palm in her hand. There's her long braid, her wearing all red. You know, there's so many things that make that video just so arresting visually, you know, and I wonder if you could speak to some of the things that we see, or some of that imagery that we see in the video.
Well, you should ask Kristina about the poem, should ask Weenta about the way it's shot. I won't speak for them, but I can say that part of what Weenta does is work with the contradiction between what you see and what you hear. You see that over and over again in her work. So sight and sound are the two main ways we receive information. We don't necessarily smell everything. We certainly don't taste everything, and you can't necessarily touch everything, but you can see and hear everything, you know, around you. And so that's what part of the subtext of her cinematography style is she gives you something to see and something to hear. And often it seems as though they are in confluence, I will say. That is, one is going one way, one is going the other way, but they both are moving together. And it encourages you to try and figure out, wait a minute, what's going on? She's talking about a runaway and she's sitting there, you know. This other one is celebrating her people, but she looked like she's standing in the swamps. What's happening, you know?
Yeah, there's such an isolation there. And although the speaker is speaking of being with people and being in conversation with other people, but it's still kind of in isolation, or in some sort of internal world, you know, I think. So yeah, such a fabulous piece. And in the I Am New Orleans video, of course, it's you, Marian Moore, and Sunni Patterson. You all lent your voices to make that, you know, to make that video come alive. Why was it important in reading that poem that you had several voices, as opposed to in the other videos where we just had one voice in each poem?
I have no idea. I didn't do it, so you know, I give credit to Weenta. She came up with the idea of how to do it.
And I also wanted to know, because it's, I mean, the Christian poem, it's so epic. It spawns, you know, it sprawls pages and pages and pages. How did you choose that particular section?
That's Weenta again.
Oh, okay.
I didn't, you know, you try and give me too much credit. You know, like I told you before, I'm from the jazz aesthetic. You know, you get a band together and you let them play. You can't don't tell them what to play. You know, get a band together. If you got a good band, you can just say, okay, we're gonna do How High the Moon. All right, 1, 2, 3, and you start. Now you ain't told the drummer what to drum. You ain't, you know, you just try to tap out a rhythm to show where you're gonna be at. I used to work with Kid Jordan, and one of the things we would perform at the Jazz Fest, and we never, ever had a rehearsal. We never, ever discussed what we're gonna do. We walk on the stage, Kid would say, hit, and you just start.
Wow.
I mean, there was no, we're gonna play this song, none of that. He just walked out and he said, hit. And in fact, I have some of that recorded. And on the 24th, I'm gonna put up a new website, and you'll be able to hear that session we did. I mean, it's.
Oh, wow.
And so
that's so exciting.
I'm saying that's what it seems to me an African aesthetic is about. It's about being in the moment and making your contribution to the collective. The collective sets up the moment, but you have to make your own contribution. Nobody tells you you have to do this or do that and so forth and so on. Sometimes you might say, well, I want this bass line. And you say, okay, but that's it. You know, I mean, you're not telling somebody what to play. So just like when you asked about I Am New Orleans, did I know the poets, what they were going to submit or discuss? No, just ask everybody to submit something. And that's what we go with that, you know?
Yeah.
That's a whole nother, that's a different aesthetic, because what it does is it releases everybody to make a contribution rather than to be directed in terms of what to do. And it seems to me, at its best, that's what America ought to strive to do. Be a society in which everybody can make a contribution and nobody tells anybody what specifically to do.
I love that you bring this up because I want to talk about Sunni's video next. You know, where you're talking about everybody contributing, you know, there's this, you know, artist giving, you know, and just letting it happen, you know. And so in Sunni's video, she's pushing back against people who come and take and take and take and take and take, you know, and that's something that I just really love about that video, because, you know, we see so many people come to New Orleans and try to change it, you know, and there's so many different changes to New Orleans. And so I guess I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts about that video. And
well, I'll tell you one thing about it. She's sitting on the steps of her house, a domicile, and she's got her children there, but she's not trying to control the children. You can see the older ones are trying to look straight ahead at the camera and everything. And a little kid down there, he's just being a little kid, you know? But she doesn't say to him, sit down, boy, sit down, you know, we're filming, whatever. No, you know. And so that's where we're at. That's where we ought to be. And so that element illustrates what Sunni is saying in terms of nothing here is for sale. You understand what I'm saying? She's saying, this is not for this. But at the same time, you see the way she, quote unquote, parents her child. She's not an oppressive parent telling the child to sit down and so forth because mama's doing this. No, you know.
Yeah. She gives him the space to move and grow and learn, you know? Yeah. That's so awesome. Thank you for, you know, talking with me about these videos. I love them so much. And I watch them all the time. I think what we'll do next is we'll transition to talking about Cosmic Deputy. Guys. Sorry, I had it backwards before. So are you ready to talk about Cosmic Deputy, Kalamu?
Yes, I'm ready to talk about Cosmic Deputy, Skye.
Amazing. Okay. Let me get my little questions here. So I really want to talk about Afam Michael Weaver's Preface. Oh my gosh, there's a portion at the end of it where he tells this anecdote, which I think sums up the collection really, about a Black man on a porch watching a car like weaving its way up a driveway through twists and turns and curves and all of these other things. And the Black man on the porch is just watching, you know, and then all of a sudden the car comes and the door opens and out steps the Black man on the porch, but another version of himself, you know? And I think what I love about Cosmic Deputy is that we see you looking back at poems that you've written, looking back on who you were, you know, as a person, as a poet, your growth, your development, and all of those things. And I love that image. You know, I thought it was just a wonderful way to end the preface. So I guess I want you to talk a little bit about, you know, how that came together and how it felt to revisit your work from so long ago, you know, your first literary efforts, you know, if you will, in terms of poetry.
Well, it's three things you're asking. Well, at least I hear three things. One, Afar, Michael Weaver. I don't even remember how we first met, but you know, I knew him, and I thought of him because he is interested. He is not interested is not the word. He is invested in Oriental literature. I believe he speaks Mandarin. So he understands, he appreciates a different aesthetic. And I knew I was doing something that was not quite what people expect from a collection of poetry. The other, that's one. So that's why I asked Afar to do the introduction. The other thing is that I've worked, as I mentioned earlier, I came out of the Army in '68 and met Tom Dent in '68. And since that time, I've been writing professionally. I was writing while I was in the Army, you know, and in high school, but I was not writing professionally. Once I got out of the Army in '68 and hooked up with Tom, that's when I started writing professionally. We started publishing and what have you. Well, I was looking at myself theoretically because philosophy is one of my interests. And at the same time, you can tell that I didn't go to anybody's philosophy school or college for this. And I wanted somebody who could pick up on what we were attempting to do. So again, going back to Afar, he had that Eastern orientation in terms of the Oriental orientation in terms of the world. And that's part of what we were doing with Cosmic Deputy. And the third thing I think is that I had this introduction, not this introduction, I had this long essay that I wrote in, I believe 90, was it 96, 94? Somewhere around there, that I'd already done. Let's see. Boy. It's the first collection of poetry, and the essay is longer than the poem. I mean, you know, the section of just the poetry. 1994, July 1994. I had been thinking theoretically about poetry for a long time, trying to figure out what, why, how come, what made it distinctive, what made it different from, what made it the same as, you know, those kinds of questions. And I'm a jump a bit, but it's all connected. There was a big battle about quote unquote American poetry. The first thing was Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman. The other thing was Phyllis Wheatley as being the beginning, you know, and then William Carlos Williams and T.S. Eliot. The Emily Dickinson, Walt Whitman had to do with whether poetry is going to be formalized in terms of the narrative and the lyric and what have you, and use poetic language, or whether it was going to be the vernacular. Walt Whitman, of course, was interested in the vernacular, and Emily Dickinson is interested in something else. These are considered the two major godheads of modern American poetry. And I looked at them, and I ended up more on the side of Walt Whitman via Carl Sandburg, whom you may know. But actually, I'll come back, I'm gonna double back on that. Well, I can say it now. What had happened was this major battle between T.S. Eliot and William Carlos Williams fascinated me. And so I did a lot of reading about both. And I did not like T.S. Eliot, but we taught it in the school. You know, some people are surprised. Come, I didn't know you were into all that stuff. I'm not into that stuff. I had to know that stuff in order to teach it. You understand what I'm saying? There's a difference between I mean, I might not know a woman, but not really know her. You understand what I'm saying? So you got to be intimate with something in order to really know them. But I could still talk about them because I knew, well, that's the same thing with the T.S. Eliot and William Carlos Williams. Now, most people of an academic background favor T.S. Eliot, Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock and all of that stuff. I even found a recording done in a stadium in, I believe, Michigan, of T.S. Eliot reading J. Alfred Prufrock. And when I heard that, I could understand better what he was trying to do or what he did with the poem. So anyway, I checked that out. But then William Carlos Williams tried to do poetry without artifice, without the language, flowery language and what have you, and say just the thing. The thing itself is a poem, is one way that he would put it. And I was, fascinated by that. And in fact, he had, William Carlos Williams in one of his books said that as far as he was concerned, a lot of the stuff that T.S. Eliot was doing was about as useful as teats on a hog. So I said, damn, he going after him heavy, And so I was checking that out, and I got heavy into, when I say got heavy into it, I read a lot of William Carlos Williams, much more than T.S. Eliot. But we were teaching T.S. Eliot in the class because he's considered a major American poet. With the exception of the fact that the boy, although he was from St. Louis, he ended up leaving St. Louis, going to Britain, and he's better known as British than he is American, And a lot of his poetry is about that British scene, Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and so forth and so on. So I'm checking all of this out, and William Carlos Williams is an advocate of using the vernacular for poetry. I said, wow, okay, I can dig that. Much more so than I can dig J. Alfred and rolling up his pants leg and walking into the sea and all like that. But I didn't relate to either one of them on a personal level. I didn't see myself in either one of them, although I could relate to what Williams was doing. And I just got into it. And I have studied a lot, I have read a lot, and checked out a lot. So that when it came time for me, talking about this 50-year, retrospective, when I wrote that first part of the book in 94, by then I had studied all of this stuff on my own and then come up with my own ideas about what poetry should be and so forth and so on. So that's how that came about. And I would dare say, to use the vocabulary that is common among some learned people, I would dare say, yeah, okay, I would dare say you'd have to look long and hard to find a poetry book like Cosmic Deputy, in which you have this long, well, a little bit more than half of the book is actually a combination of memoir, autobiography, and poetry, but I use the poetry to illustrate the points I'm making, and theory. I mean, this is theory heavy, and I know it, but I don't think anybody's going to think of it as theory heavy. They're just going to read it and, well, you're talking about how you started doing this and how you did that and so forth. What I'm really doing is dealing with the question of what is poetry? How do you put it together? What do you draw on for your experiences and what have you? And so that's how Cosmic Deputy was put together. July of 1994, I knew, I had come to the conclusion, let me put it that way, not that I knew, I had come to the conclusion about what I believed a poem is and how I came to that conclusion, and wrote all of that down. So I wrote that long essay. In 1994, I had no thought about Cosmic Deputy or anything like that, but it was something that I was certain I wanted to do. I wanted to explain what I was doing, partially because a lot of the, you can tell I have an anti-academic bone, sternum, it's more than the collarbone. I mean, and it's not necessarily where my head is at all the time. I don't have to think about it all over, but I did at that point. I wanted to think about these questions of what is poetry, how is it put together, how does it come from one's life and everything. And I wrote that in 94. Had no idea that I was going to do Cosmic Deputy. Cosmic Deputy was years later, decades even later, because Cosmic Deputy just recently came out. So what I'm saying is, for me, I use everything of my life. And if I've done it, I've done it, and I just put it down there. It's organized the way it is only because it's a collection. But when you look at it, and if you look closely, none of the poems have dates on them, so you don't know when the poems were written. And the intro has stuff that goes all the way back to the very beginning in '68. So that's part of what I'm doing. Part of it is dates don't matter to me, but the other part is I wanted people to understand that that I'm not just coming off the top of my pointed little head, or I'm just not what I'm feeling at the moment, or I'm inspired by this or that or the other. When I'm writing poetry, I have some ideas in terms of what I'm dealing with. Let's see what I got here. I got, I'll do this. Page 178. This is an interesting one. Yeah. Haiku. Japanese form, 5 syllables first line, 7 syllables second line, 5 syllables the third line. I use haiku a lot, but I was not interested in the Japanese form other than the lines 5, 7, 5. And I have a strong, as most blues-based work does, I have a strong affinity for the erotic. And I use it in a lot of different ways. But then, because of who I am, I take the erotic and mix it with the so-called spiritual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
The holy versus the profane, and
all of that, it's all one as far as I'm concerned.
mm-hmm.
My grandfather was on my mother's side was a Baptist preacher, had a church on Desire, 1230 Desire Street, Greater Liberty Baptist Church. My grandfather on my father's side was what they call a jackleg preacher. He just, from time to time, would go out there. He didn't have no church or nothing, so forth and so on. So anyway, this haiku number 97, and I got a book of haiku coming out. It's a rank advertisement. I have a book of haiku coming out sometime this year called, what is it called? It's called, there's something to do with, it'll come to me. I mean, I do so many different things, you know. But anyway, haiku number 97. I enter your church. You receive my offerings. Our screaming choirs merge. I enter your church. You receive my offerings. Our screaming choirs merge. Now you can read that on a number of different levels. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's intentional. So there's the intimacy of lovers. There is one giving to and receiving the other. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And it could be about the physical act of making love, or it could be about the spiritual act of one giving to the other, or it could be about both. And that's what I was striving for with that piece. Mm-hmm. And what I like about the haiku is you can get real deep philosophically, but you are limited in terms of the length. So you've got 17 syllables. You got to, as we used to say, you got to hit it and quit it. But you got to figure out what it is you're doing. You know, and that's what's, I don't know what it means to you, but that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah, you know, there's it's so compressed, but that compression is what makes it powerful, what adds the power, you know, and the subversion of expectation, the merging of the holy and the profane, being able to read it in a literal sense, you know, I enter your church, you receive my offerings, our screaming choirs merge. That could be literal. Then there's the metaphorical reading, you know, and it just, you can extrapolate it from there. And so I think that's really what makes this poem so multi-layered and just, you know, quite incredible, really.
Well, you call it multi-layered. I believe it comes out of the part of the quote unquote Black experience, and by extension, a lot of the human experience, is that we live in societies in which there's an element of danger, personal danger. so that you cannot fully express straight out. And so it's subliminated in one sense. And in another sense, it speaks about what Du Bois called a double consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, you try and present that. But I was not always interested in just double consciousness. I also did, I'm gonna give you one other one, 107.
Wait, I'm sorry, you said 107?
Yeah, 107.
Okay.
Oh, that's right, you following along, huh?
Yes.
um,
Kalamu, you know I'm a nerd. I'm like, I'm just like, I need to read it. I need to see it. I need to be it. You know, all of those things.
Most of the Black nerds that I know or know of, they may have a nerdy exterior, but they didn't get to be nerds without finding out something about the world. Mm-hmm. You know, and most of the nerds may be known for one thing, but I guarantee you they into something else also. You know, and I won't embarrass you by asking you all the stuff you into. You know, that laugh tells us everything. You know, you got people. You can put your phone number up on the screen afterwards. You get a couple of calls.
Oh my goodness.
She says that she
you're
laughs
hilarious.
So
you're hilarious. That's so funny. I'm just honest about my nerdiness, you know. I don't try to hide it.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, your phone number's on the screen. You can call. Anyway.
Oh my gosh.
I also have a number of poems which are straight up what some people call political poems, and they're usually written out of a real world experience. There was a woman by the name of Desi Woods who was assaulted by a law enforcement officer while she was, I forget where it was, but anyway, he assaulted her. And she ended up getting his gun and shooting him. And there was a long trial and everything. So she eventually got off. But after being in jail for a couple of years, 3 or 4 years, I forget exactly how long. So I wrote this for Desi Woods, and it's called Highway Blues. Ain't it enough? He think he owned these hot blacktop highways, them East 8 acres, that red Chevy pickup with the dumb bumper stickers and big, wide, heavy rubber tires, 2 show enough ugly brown bloodhounds, and a big tan and white German Shepherd who evil and got yellow teeth. Ain't it enough? He got a couple of kids to beat on, a wife who was a high school cheerleader, a brother who is a doctor, a cousin with a hardware store, a divorced sister with dyed hair, a collection of Hustler magazines dating back to the beginning, partial sight in his left eye, gray hairs growing out his ear, a sun-scorched leathery neck that's cracking, a rolling limp in his bow-legged walk, and a couple of cases of beer in the closet. Ain't it enough? He got all that without having to mess with me. Yeah, I shot the motherfucker. So that's nothing like the haiku.
Right. I mean, here we're taking on a persona. you know, that the other poem doesn't, doesn't
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, part of what I'm saying is that for me, in terms of, you're talking about Cosmic Deputy, 50 years of writing, for me is I don't have one style. I can, I can go with this, or I can deal with that, and we work on it. We just work on it and constantly work and try and figure out how to do that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That poem is incredible. I love the repetition of "ain't it enough?" Like the just wanting to just being so tired, so frustrated. The frustration of the speaker is really conveyed so well here, just with the repetition of that one phrase. You can sense that energy. I just love that, and just these descriptions of this officer, of this life beyond this interaction, of imagining this life. Because I think in so many situations, especially when we're wronged or someone has done something to us, we tend to look at people in a one-dimensional way, but this poem asks us to look beyond what the surface is. And I just think that it's just so well done.
Yeah, well, editor, cut that part out about well done and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. She big up in me. I don't need that. I mean, I know I can write a little bit, and I'm not being offensive. I'm being satirical. I know I can write a little bit, but the thing is, I think a lot of us can do this, but not a lot of us are willing to dedicate ourselves to do it, whatever it is we're able to do. And that's a hard thing. So you asked me about this book, and it's 50 years from 68 to 2019, 50 years of writing poetry. And whereas then the stuff is not dated. So you can't tell necessarily when something was written, except for the, about 10 or 15 of the poems in the beginning of the poetry section, which are taken from books, and I say what year the books came out. Mm-hmm. But other than that, no, I'm not. And that's a question. That's my take on the whole question of quote unquote poetic development and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, either you got it or you ain't got it. And if you got it, either you develop it or you don't develop it. And if you develop it, that means you had it. And if you had it, you're gonna have it whether you're 16 or you're 66. If that's really your gift, then you'll have it. And I was blessed to have a gift for words. And so, that's the way that's put together. So here it is. This book comes out in 2020. And half of the book was written in, 94. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
These
books take time,
Why you say it takes time?
Why do I say that?
Yeah, why do you say it takes time?
There's so much that goes into it. You have to go back through your poems, over the span of 50 years. Then you kind of have to think about, because of the essay, because of the memoir component to it, you think about, okay, what was going on when I wrote that poem? Where was that, where was I at in my development? All of these different things. And then you also, like you said, you brought in criticism here. There's theory in here. So all of these things need to be, put into the work. And I think it takes time, to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's evident.
Maybe
I
it
wanted
does.
to,
Go ahead.
oh,
I was going to say maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. In my case, what I was saying is that the time period doesn't have to be as long as we might think. So by 94, I was ready. I could have done Cosmic Deputy in 94, but I didn't have a relationship with a publisher at that point. You see, when I finished that long essay, then I had stuff. But at the same time, over the time period between 94 and 2020, I've written other stuff. I don't write that much poetry anymore, but it's easy for me to do because I've studied it, learned it, and I can do it. I'm interested in doing some other stuff right now, but yeah. So yeah, it does take time, but it doesn't take as much time as you think. It really takes dedication. Is this something you want to do? Is this something you really want to do? It goes back to the jazz aesthetic, that many of the important jazz recordings were done when people were young. They were young when they did them. And
wow. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, for instance, the Highway Blues poem.
yeah.
How long did it take you to start the poem and finish the poem? And by finish, I mean get to the place where you think, I'm going to start sending this out for publication. Like, what is, because everyone has kind of a different, time frame for working with poems or completing and developing poems. I'm just curious, what your timeline usually looks like when you're developing a poem.
Physically, the physical writing part for me is easy and fast. I subconsciously think about things, and then sometimes I don't. I mean, sometimes it just comes to me and boom, I do it. Other times I think about it and it'll come up. But the main thing for me was that I was always in the context of work, politics, social struggles. So Desi Woods was a real person. This poem is not, the officer in the poem is not a real person. And in fact, I didn't look up and see who the officer was that she shot. But the incident was real. And when I heard about it, it came to me one day and I wrote it. And it doesn't take me that long once I have the idea. The idea may be something that comes instantly, or it may be something that germinates for a while. There's no one way of saying it,
Yeah. Well, what about revision? What is that process like for you? Just making sure everything is, how do you know when a poem is done for you? Because I think I'm always like, is this done? I don't know. I could keep doing different permutations of it,
I do so much stuff that revision is the last thing that's on my mind, and I very seldom think about it. I trust myself and I write, and I'll see something and I'll write something, and maybe a couple of years later, somebody might ask me about a poem for this, that, or the other, and I'll look at it to make sure it's everything I want. I might change a word or two, but as far as revision, I don't do much revising.
Wow.
I just,
that's incredible.
Well, it's just one way of doing it.
Yeah.
Again, I studied writers of the 40s. I think I explained that Langston Hughes turned me on to the Orient and so forth and so on, because he had traveled around the world. And in the Japanese tradition, they had a poetic tradition where they wrote poems on rice paper. And the thing was, you dipped the quill into the ink pot, you wrote it on the rice paper, and that was it.
Wow.
You could not revise it because the rice paper is very thin. If you try to erase it or change it in any way,
The whole paper's ruined.
yeah, the whole thing is ruined. So you get to that point. In jazz, for instance, there's no rehearsals per se for everything you play. You go up on the bandstand, and if you're in the band and the band leader says, all right, A train, and we do it, and when it's your turn to solo, you can't say, well, wait a minute, I haven't thought it through. No, you got to just play it when it's your turn to play. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the way I feel about the writing. When it's my time to write, I just write it, you know? And if it doesn't come out too good, hey, do another one, do it later, do it something else, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Monk used to say, Thelonious Monk, pianist, he told, Sideman said, they wanted to do another take. He said, because I messed up. He said, well, you learn to live with that. We're going on, we're moving on. We're not gonna, you know, just sit here and go back over and over. This whole striving for perfection is a bunch of bullshit. Because we are human beings. There's nothing that we can do that's perfect. But we can always do the best that we can at the moment. So let's do that. Let's do the best that we can at the moment. And later on, it may be that we can do better. So we'll do something that's better, you know? But that's what we were doing at that particular time. Do that, you know, hit it and quit, go on to something else. And there are people I know who revise, who work on, Tom Dent worked on his stuff, and he did a lot of revision. And I used to sit there sometime and just watch him work, you know, and we talk about it, and, you know, but he didn't do a lot of, he didn't publish a lot. And except for the brief time with Black Art South, and he still didn't do as much as most of us did. He didn't perform a lot. Well, I come out of a tradition where you're performing, you're writing a lot and so forth. Like I said, I was an editor for 13 years of a magazine and what have you. So I didn't have the luxury of trying to make something perfect. And I didn't have that concept of writing. For me, it was hit it, boom. Here's the opportunity, do it. And you do the best that you can at that moment. But that's a jazz aesthetic. You know, you take a lot of famous jazz compositions. Those were the first time the musicians were playing that collectively. And once they were on record, then you look back and say, oh, that's great. Let's, you know, and that, but they didn't all play that. I mean, like Kind of Blue, which is probably one of the most famous jazz records ever by Miles Davis with John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, Wynton Kelly, and what's his name? Bill Evans on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and Philly Joe Jones, if I'm not mistaken. Miles didn't tell them, okay, we're gonna play this, and we're gonna play that, we're gonna play the other, we're gonna rehearse this, and we're gonna have rehearsal, you know, on Wednesday and Thursday, and then we're gonna record it on Saturday. That's not the way it went. You know, and it's not the way it went. They showed up, there's the music, let's go do it. Boom, Miles said this. Say, we're gonna play off this scale, or we're gonna do this, that, and the other. You gotta do it. And so I'm saying, and I know this is controversial, I'm saying that we as writers need to catch up with the musicians. I understand that revision is part of the process of writing, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can develop ourselves so that we are so invested in being a writer at any given time, we can write whatever. And if that doesn't work, we'll write something else.
Yeah, I think you can psych yourself out of the poem or what you were originally trying to do with the poem by just constantly chopping it and it's just something gets lost of that original feeling, that depth that you're originally conveying, and so I was just curious about your process and how that works for you. So I appreciate you answering that question. I think we may be running close to time. And so I want to ask you, Kalamu, is there anything else you want to leave our viewers with about Cosmic Deputy or about I Am New Orleans? Any final thoughts?
Well, visually, Cosmic Deputy was shot at B. Mike's studio.
Oh, awesome.
Brandon Odoms. And the photograph was by one of my former students at McMain.
It's a great photo if you guys can see that.
Yeah, she, B. Mike done this mural, which is behind me. And the mural is in his studio. So I went over there, and it just so happens I had the same shirt on that he did the mural based on when I went there. And so I'm sitting there, and I said, this will work. This will definitely work. And it's black and white, where a lot of stuff is color these days. But, we do that, and it reflects me as an activist and a writer rather than as a poet per se. So you see the writing on the mural behind me, those are my words that B. Mike did. I mean, it's yeah. A lot of this stuff has, and that's the Algiers 7. We are coming out of City Hall. We had taken over the mayor's office. We went in on a Thursday, and took over and came out on a Saturday afternoon. And that Saturday afternoon, that's us coming out. That's me in front, and around each of our necks, we have a sign that has the name of somebody who was killed in Algiers by the police. And so that's me. Daniel Jonathan is right behind me. Behind him, Idris Ford. There's someone, I can't remember the person behind Idris. And then there's, what's his name? This is the last person in the line is a Jewish activist who was part of what we were doing at the time. So somebody looking at this is a collection of 50 years of poetry by Kalamu Salaam, but the cover doesn't say anything about poetry. The cover is about activism, and because that's real. I mean, that's where a lot of the poetry came from, and so forth and so on.
I love the cover. It's stunning.
But so that's what I would say. Now, I Am New Orleans. That's the picture I found searching for Marcus Christian.
And here's a picture of him when he was.
And that's a picture of him, when he was in his later years at UNO as a professor.
Wow.
And I didn't have to. I mean, I argued for that cover because at first they were saying, well, it doesn't really say New Orleans or anything like that. And I say, well, I'm not I don't want to do no tourist book. I don't want to do something, Old Man River, lift them bills, suck that corn. I wasn't interested in that.
None of that.
And this book I knew was going to be built around the Marcus Christian poem. So I felt that, and he's looking, you can see him, he looks serious about whatever he's going to get into as an adult. I said, yeah, that's what I want to use that. And
so regal and so self-assured, you know, like the confidence of the photo.
Part of my photography was my first love. And that's the next major project I'm going to do is called Seeing Black, Photography in New Orleans, 1840 and beyond. Because photography was developed in France in 1839. There was a man by the name of Jules Léon, born in France, domiciled in New Orleans, free man of color, used to go back and forth. He happened to be in France when photography was developed, came back home to New Orleans, and in 1840, he did an exhibition here in New Orleans, and he was, by trade, he was a lithographer and a painter, but he picked up photography. So I'm, and that was, by the way, only the second time that photography was exhibited in the United States. About, I think 3 or 6 months earlier in New York, there had been an exhibit, but other than that, there had been no other exhibits of photography in the United States. And so New Orleans has that lineage, but that's not well known. So anyway, that's going to be my next project. And I started off my first serious endeavor in terms of the arts was as a photographer. In 7th grade, I got into writing in 8th grade. And although most people who know me as a writer, I've always been a photographer. And, although I've never concentrated on photography after I got out of high school, well, actually after I got out of the Army, because then I decided to really concentrate on writing, and I put the camera aside as a main thing I would do. And so this next project, though, is going to be on photography. It's not going to have any of my photographs in it, but but it's going to be about the history of photography and images over the years from people in New Orleans.
That sounds wonderful. So you have the haiku project coming out, and then your photography project coming out too. And when can we expect to get these books? Or
the haiku book will be sometimes this year. Before the haiku book, there's another book called Go to Jail. It's a book about incarceration. Louisiana, United States is #1 in the world in terms of incarceration. Louisiana is #1 in the United States, and New Orleans is #1 in Louisiana. So this is ground zero. We did this whole book, and that book is over, in terms of the writing of it, that book is well over 20 years old. But it's just now coming out, and it deals with incarceration in Louisiana, including a history of Angola prison. So that's going to be coming out. Actually, it's published by the University of California, Santa Barbara. I've got a notice that it's published. They've got it, and they're sending it to New Orleans. So I expect next week or the week after, it'll be here in New Orleans. Then the A Precise Tenderness, which is the haiku book, will come out later. And then I'm working on, this Seeing Black book. I've got a couple other projects, writing projects in mind. I haven't done any of my fiction yet. I was first known, before I was known as a poet, I was known as a playwright. And I won some awards doing that stuff. And then from the playwriting, I got into videography, making movies and writing scripts for that and so forth and so on. So I might do some of that, but who knows? I mean, Marcus Christian used to call it wrist exercise. I might have a little wrist exercise and do this, that, or the other. You keep working. I mean, that's what I do. If I was a bricklayer and I only built one house a year, people would think I was a lazy so-and-so, you know what I'm saying? Because if I was a bricklayer, they expect to see something, you know.
Mhm.
You did the sidewalk or something, and what you been doing with yourself? You know what I'm saying? Well, I'm a writer, and I'm gonna be constantly doing stuff and coming up with stuff. So that's the way I look at it, and that's why I have so much stuff. In fact, there's a whole era of my writing that was before Katrina, well before Katrina, but those books are out of print, so I don't even talk about them much. You know, they're mentioned in Cosmic Deputy, but you know, I don't talk about it, all of that stuff I did way back when, because you know, people interested in now. They really want to get to the future. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You know,
and you have so many exciting projects just on the burner, you know, just released. I mean, it's pretty incredible. Can you tell our viewers where they can pick up copies of these if they wanted to buy them?
yeah, if you want to buy them, Community Book Center downtown, Octavia Books uptown, and of course you can go online and get them. You can go to UNO Press, just put in UNOPRESS.org, I think it is, and you can order them that way, or you can, you know, Amazon. I'm not a good salesman, you know, but they are widely available. And right now they're, like I mentioned, this book, From a Bend in the River, this book is out of print. And it has an interesting story. Now, I'll tell you the story just briefly. We, this is a hardback. We collected our little pennies and borrowed money from some people and family and friends and everything. We got the book done. 100 poets, you know. We was pleased. That was in '98, right? Actually, it didn't actually come out till '99. And what happens less than a decade later? Katrina. And we had our books, all the books were warehoused in John Scott, the artist, his studio, which was out in by Almanasta, or for Gentilly, and it flooded out. All the books are gone. There have been decades of work that have been lost, and I'm not going to redo it. I'm not going to redo From a Bend in the River. That's ancient history now, as far as I'm concerned. And I appreciate the opportunity you've given us to, I say us, which is the, I'm not a aristocrat, so it's not the royal us, like the Queen or nothing like that. But I come from a collective experience, and once you see what I'm doing, you understand. My partner is a longtime associate, Ayo Femi Robinson. She's from Georgia originally, and joined the writing workshop I had, the No More Literary Society, many years ago. Katrina was, again, I'm coming right back to Katrina. That was a major development, major happening in the development of New Orleans culture. We were going to celebrate our 10th year anniversary on September 2005. Katrina hits and everybody scatters. And, you know, we lost books and everything else and so forth and so on. And then we slowly got people together. Well, Ayo was with me in doing NOMO for 10 years. And then she's been with me ever since as we're doing these different projects. So sometimes you don't see her name, sometimes you do, but she is a major part of what we do. I want to just give her a shout out as we leave.
Yeah, I mean, you two do amazing work. And I just want to thank you for, you know, letting me sit down and have this conversation with you. I've learned so much, and I know that everyone who's watching this has learned a lot too. And I just want to thank UNO Press for making this happen, and the Tennessee Williams Festival for allowing us to get together and do this as well. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.
You're welcome. Be well.